Right, everyone, a very warm welcome to our feedback session on English and Maths for Block 2. We're going to be talking to you about what the children have been focusing on, but also suggesting things that they continue to look at in those two subjects. We're also going to outline where we go next, what happens in our next block of lessons, which starts this coming Saturday. We do get a couple more sessions in before we break up for Christmas, which will be great. But also really want to also give you a few reminders about some Christmassy things coming up as well. I'm also just going to let in Paula Hobden, who is also joining us, which is great. So we've got a few tutors that have given up their time to come and speak to you as well. So we will certainly get them to give us a little bit of an insight as we go along. So I'm just going to get my slides ready, and then I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you'll all be able to see this okay. So as I say, we've decided to do this in a slightly different format. Usually we would meet you in the classrooms or in the halls and give you feedback on what the children have been doing in Block 2. Hopefully you have received your child's results back. I appreciate some of you will get them back during the week if you have a weekday class, but I know a number of you at the weekend will have found out how your child got on both with their English test and also their mathematics test as well. Obviously, for English and Maths, these are subjects that appear across the board in terms of the 11 plus. So there will be English comprehension and SPAG in the Kendrick, the Slough Consortium, the Buckinghamshire exam as well. If your child is also going for Reading Boys, they will have an English comprehension and also an element of kind of spelling as well that they will need to do. I am going to share also with you some examples as well, particularly of some spelling, punctuation and grammar questions. I just wanted you to be as familiar as you can with the format that will be presented to your child in. So just to reiterate the objectives, we're going to talk about those two topics. We're going to talk about English and mathematics. We're going to highlight some areas of development. And I say it's wonderful to have a few tutors who've been able to join me tonight as well, who I'm sure will be keen to express their opinions on how their groups have been faring. But I think certainly what we would really encourage you to do is have a read through the reports that are now online and see how your child has individually got on, and do read the comments that the tutors put in, because I know they want to be as informative as they can about where your child goes next and what they need to focus on. What we tend to find is that with English particularly, certainly with English comprehension, then sometimes reading skills are really put to the test in terms of being able to read the information, then answer a series of questions. Are children prepared to refer back to the text? How well read is that child? How familiar are they with the actual topic that they're reading about? That obviously helps. But what is really important is that children look at their answer options carefully. It is all multiple choice, and they consider what could be the right answer. Sometimes children don't always go back to the text. They kind of read it, want to remember as much of it as they can, and then when they get to the questions, they don't go back and confirm whether that answer is right. So that's something we've really emphasized. I think the timing aspect of it is important, that when children are reading, they have to read at a good pace, and we do see a big variation with the children's reading skills. You know, sometimes children are able to read very quickly and get to the questions. Some of the children do struggle. So, of course, the timed aspect of these tests is really important, and hence why every 5 weeks we do these tests. We have recently released our mock exams as well, which you'll probably be now familiar with in terms of when they're going to be laid out across the academic year. We will start those in Easter. We will also have them right the way through the summer period as well. So if you are keen to sign up for any of those mock exams and really find out how your child is performing under those test conditions. Of course, though, in the recent assessments that we've done, they are done under test conditions. Children are expected to work quietly through those tests, and we do sort of ensure that there is that quiet environment for children to work through the questions. You hopefully have received those tests back, as I say, and really worth delving into those and having a look and seeing how your child has performed. So in terms of English and GL assessment, then The comprehension has been a big focus. We've covered different genres. We've done non-fiction, we've done fictional pieces. I think there may have even been the occasional poem thrown in as well, because we never know exactly what the exam board's going to present. But it's very much been about learning the strategies and the techniques and understanding how to approach comprehension. There are different ways of doing it. Sometimes children may go and look at the questions first and then come back to the passage. Time is not really on their side, so we would really encourage them to start the reading process straight away, making sure they read things like the title. That's important. You never know, they might be asked a question about the title or the short synopsis at the start of a piece, but reading it through thoroughly. I think if there is any time left at the end, then maybe they can go back and read it again, but generally once through, not skimming and scanning. And skimming and scanning is a method that's taught at school. It means that they're sort of looking, just looking for key bits of information. That's not wise in the 11 plus. You do need to read it thoroughly through from the first word to the last, because all of it's going to be very much connected, I'm sure, but we don't want children rushing that reading process. And it's all about internalizing what they've read as well. So taking regular pauses and thinking, what is this passage telling me? What information have I gleaned? What emotions have I potentially picked up from some of the characters? And trying to take in that information. How often do you as an adult read something I think, oh, maybe I need to reread that again. I didn't really take that all in. So something the children can do as well is obviously read through that information. So some people said they haven't quite had their results back, which is fine. Of course, on Thursday, you'll have that opportunity to get your results back and find out how your child has got on. So sorry, we've sort of started that from Saturday, and it will lead right up, of course, until the end of the week. Can I also just mention in terms of the English, then each week we've focused on something slightly different, whether that be spelling, punctuation, grammar. And the way that that is presented is in the following format. So if we just have a little look here at the spelling. Children are given a sentence, and the expectation is they have to find a spelling mistake, or perhaps not. Now, we do have a number of children at Teacher Wright who do have dyslexia and sometimes find it quite hard to spell words. I think in some ways this format is probably slightly easier for them as long as they know how to spell that word. But I think certainly being a good speller is important. We recently sent out what's called a commonly misspelt word list. And I've just taken a capture of that. So you'll see this little booklet down here. Hopefully you've all received that. If you have not received that booklet, please do let our office know, because we have been printing them all out, trying to get them out, of course, to all the locations. But if you missed that week or for whatever reason you haven't got it, please do let our office know or let your tutor know and just say, I need that commonly misspelt word list, because what we've done over the years is we've collated a lot of the words that have come up in the 11 plus that children need to be able to be good at spelling. So please do have a look. The ones that I've got here as the answers, just to point out, of course, we've got the word tournament, missed the U out, and then we've got received. That's a common word, particularly with the E and the I, making sure that's the right way round. And then we've got the word pursued, which of course is P-U-R-S-U-E-D. And I think the hardest thing sometimes with these particular questions is actually selecting N. So on the multiple choice sheet, there will be an N that they need to record, and that will indicate that there is no spelling mistake at all. So it's being confident in their spelling ability. Now, of course, every week we do a spelling test. And I think something the tutors, I'm sure, would want me to emphasize, please do ensure your child learns those words. The reason those words are given is because they are commonly misspelt words that could potentially appear within the 11 plus. So getting them to learn them is super, super important. So please do learn them. The spelling test starts right at the beginning of the lesson. This is encouraging you to get there on time. Make sure you're ready for the start of that lesson. But please encourage your child to learn them. The expectation, it's only 10. I know sometimes children say, oh, we've got a spelling test at school as well. But it is important that they do learn the words that we do give them. They know every week which ones, of course, they've got to do. They've got their spelling lists now in their passports. They're all in there. So please do make sure they do learn them. Also, punctuation is also laid out in a very similar way to the spelling section, that you have to look for a punctuation mistake. I do find with punctuation that children do need to have a really good understanding of those different punctuation marks. I was recently actually in a lesson in Gerrard's Cross where the tutor was going through the different pieces of punctuation and then got to the comma and said, well, actually, there are so many different ways of using that comma. And she was going through all those different rules. I think it's really important that children have a really good grasp of that. It is something we will come back to as we go through the year. But of course, a child can't spot where a semicolon is going to be missing if they don't know how a semicolon is used. And likewise with all those other high frequency pieces of punctuation. It is about reading it, because if you don't read it, you may not spot where certain things like apostrophes and things go. So it's really important that the children read the sentence thoroughly and see if they can understand where that punctuation is missing. So just in these examples, the sentence is divided into the sections. And just to let you know, and I'm sure you quickly worked it out, there's no full stop there. Should be a full stop at the end of animal. So that would mean that then the child selects a D. So on their multiple choice sheet, they would select D as their answer. On 39, and again, if you don't read it, you wouldn't necessarily spot it, but of course we need a question mark. But how accurate is this? So the question mark is missing there. So it would be in B. I've put 40 in because when you do look at that, and of course those sentences are linked together, there is nothing wrong with it. There is no punctuation errors at all. So on their multiple choice sheet, they would select an N. Now, I think the key part of also being good at punctuation questions is recognizing, for example, things like capital letters. Where would they go? If you think about seasons, for example, unless it's the name of a park or something, I don't know, the summer park, you wouldn't be using a capital letter for seasons. And it's knowing those individual rules. And of course, at Teach It Right, one of our key objectives with punctuation is to make sure that children know all their punctuation marks thoroughly. If you are looking for a specific resource for punctuation, and it's something you know your child has struggled on, potentially in this block, they found it difficult, do please visit the BBC Bitesize website. The Key Stage 2 BBC Bitesize is phenomenal. It has some great little video clips on the different pieces of punctuation, and it's a great resource, I feel, as well for helping children on some of the punctuation marks that maybe are a little bit more obscure. The other section which children have to focus on in English is the grammar section. These act very much like a closed passage. So the idea being children are given a set of words and they have to find the word that sort of fits into the gap. And again, we practice this. We talk to children about looking for the different clues, things like verbs in the past tense, etc., making sure that they know things like homophones, and it really is a very key aspect to doing well with the grammar section, is making sure they understand good sentence structure, they know things like future tense, past tense, present tense verbs as well. So again, just a little snippet here of what it will potentially look like in their exams. We have a sort of a again, sort of every year we have a lot of children that feed back to us about the test that they've just done. So if we look back in September, we got a lot of feedback about the questions that were there. And again, they had about 7 of each type. So 7 spelling, 7 punctuation, and 7 grammar. So again, it just gives you a little bit of an insight into that GL assessment test specifically in terms of how many questions they would get. Just before I move on to the maths, as I say, I do appreciate the tutors, some tutors joining us this evening. So I wonder whether I could just pick their brains a little bit around the English and how they felt their children got on, but also things that they noticed as well. Now, obviously, we're talking very generally today, but do have a look at the reports. That will give you an insight into exactly how your child's done. But I wonder if I could start with you, Sarah, if that's okay. You are top of my screen, but I wonder whether you could just tell me a little bit about your group and how they fared with the English sections.
I found the inference questions and the comprehension quite tricky. So, like you said at the start, reading it and reading it again, when you've got the question in your mind, then reading over that section again with a focus on that question, I think would really help there. Also, the second comprehension was a poem.
Yeah.
I found challenging because, again, that's a lot about inference and what the words mean in context, which they found
Thanks,
a bit
Sarah.
trickier.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? The inference side of it, that what we do tend to find with something like the 11 plus is that the answer isn't just going to be extracted from the text, and I agree wholeheartedly with you, Sarah, that I think having that inference, and that's why when you are doing reading at home with your child, which I'm sure a lot of you are doing, or even if they're reading independently, that you do try and question them a little bit on what they're reading, try and tease out those questions, because again, that is going to really support their comprehension skills. And inference is certainly a skill that they need to be really good at. Sarah, I don't wonder whether I could just sort of pick your brains around the spelling, punctuation, and grammar that you've been doing with your children, and sort of any sort of themes around those three topics.
Well, the spellings obviously we work on every week. I would say the children did quite okay with that section, actually. The grammar, we've been working on the skills of making sure that they read the word within the sentence that they've chosen to make sure that that's correct. And if they're not sure of the word, to make sure that they put each word into the sentence and read it, because to a certain extent, your mind actually tells you if it's correct or not. So to make sure that they always check that way. In terms of punctuation, I agree with you about BBC Bite Size, because some children, it depends as well of their exposure of it within their own schools. So some children knew a vast range of punctuation and others didn't. I would say with the BBC Bite Size to look at the Key Stage 2 as well as Key Stage 3. So children obviously achieved, well, obviously their marks were different. Some achieved better than others. But some of it was down to previous exposure. And we found that out from the first lesson when we asked them to note down the marks that they already knew and the meanings for those marks. And also in terms of capital letters, for them to remember that can come under, well, it does. It comes under the punctuation in terms of, for example, if it's a proper noun, making sure that if they've missed the capital letter there, that's identified.
Sorry, thank you. And I've just actually put that Key Stage 3 link directly into the chat. And I certainly agree with you. In so many respects, certainly some of the content that we're dealing with here is slightly more advanced than Key Stage 2. And I'm sure I don't need to be telling all our wonderful parents this. I'm sure they realise that the 11 plus in itself is a challenging test. And we certainly know that it does go beyond our students' years. So please don't fret if you find that your child doesn't know some of the punctuation marks or isn't aware of how they are used. It probably is a case they've not been taught this at school, and this is where I think we certainly get excited ourselves about having to introduce these topics and build up their confidence in these areas. I think with punctuation, and I think it's a sort of a known thing with some of the 11 plus punctuation marks, that it is not always just going to be your full stops and your capital letters, that they do look at parentheses, for example, things like brackets and semicolons and commas. And there are so many rules around these different punctuation marks. So the more they practice, the better they will get. Sarah, thank you very much indeed.
Chris, could I just say just about the comprehension on one of the tips, because we've given the excellent tips throughout the weeks that they've recorded, like in their jotter, etc., and we've given it on the feedback. In terms of searching for the keywords that are the same in the question into the text, they just need to be very, very careful on that, because if you looked at the first question within the assessment, advertising comes up as an option as A and as D. So if they just match the words and then just go for the first answer, which I think they've done on purpose on this assessment, the answer was in fact D. If they're just matching the words and they're not reading around that part of the text, they could actually be led to the incorrect answer.
Thanks, Sarah. No, and it is a sort of a trick that some of the examiners will play, that it is about, teaching the children to refer back to the text. And yeah, I mean, I agree with you very much so in terms of, I think what we tend to find is that assumption that just because I've read it, I'll remember it all. And particularly when they're lengthy pieces of text, children aren't going to remember all those key elements. So going back to the text is really, really crucial. Thank you very much. Oliver, Sophie, I think we may have a question.
Hi.
Hi,
It's Tony Oliver here.
Hi, Dan.
In terms of the comprehension, will the questions always appear in the same order as they appear in the text? So A will always come before B.
No.
Okay.
So interesting. I think examiners have learned that it isn't a case that question 1 will always refer to paragraph 1, question 2 with paragraph 2. It's changed now. That, for example, you may well have the first question may relate to something at the end of the passage,
right.
And I think that's done very deliberately. That they want children to have read the whole piece through. That you can't just sort of go straight to the questions and then exactly where to refer back to. So I think gone are those days where it's sort of I suppose a marrying activity, really, where you're just sort of matching it all up. And I think examiners have become wise to that sort of format of comprehensions. But really good question. But we certainly know it gets very much mixed up. Yeah. I think we'll move on, guys, if that's okay, to have a little chat about mathematics. So we're going to jump now and just talk to you about what the children have covered, but also certainly what we've noticed in the maths part of the block as well. So we have talked to the children a lot about some key terminology, focused a lot on things like factors, talked about multiples, various different sequences as well, things like prime numbers, squared numbers, cube numbers. We've also looked, of course, at the methodology that children use. I think, not to our surprise, we do know that some children have not covered things like long multiplication or long division before. Even in their own schooling, they may not have done it. It certainly has been something that I know children have found difficult. And speaking to the tutors, speaking to the children, and also speaking to you parents as well at the centres, we've had quite a bit of feedback about, right, my child's struggling on that, kind of what are we going to do next? So we are planning on actually sending out over the Christmas holidays, not to make them do it on Christmas Day, of course, but over the Christmas to actually focus a little bit on those two particular operations, so sort of long multiplication and long division. We will be sending quite a lot of supporting sort of slides with those questions, so children can again go back through that method again. I know the tutors have spent a bit of time even deviating off the plans a little bit to make sure that their understanding of those two methods are strong. But again, don't be surprised again if your child's not done it at all at school. It may well be that we're introducing it for the first time, but we do want children to be good with those methods. It is all about, as I mentioned earlier, all about efficiency. It's about being quick. You want children to use a method that's not going to take them too long. And I know within school setting, and having been a school teacher in the past, I know things like the grid method, the chunking method for division. These are great methods, but they're not really applicable for an exam situation. They're going to take children far, far too long. And as much as they show children very much the value of number, particularly with something like the grid method, where they partition the numbers into their different columns, it would be something that would take too long to actually apply in an exam. So we are all about efficiency, but we will be sending out, as I say, some emails in the next few weeks for children just to practice those methods again, build up their confidence with those operations, because we know how important they are. We've also done quite a bit on sort of word problems. This will also become more prevalent when we get round to block 4. When we start getting into those very meaty topics, things like ratio and algebra, averages is another one that we cover off. We have, though, shunted a lot of topics into this block and brought them slightly earlier than previous years. And I think we've been very conscious that children, certainly in the sort of COVID years, did fall back a little bit with their maths. And we wanted to bring some of those topics earlier into the curriculum, if you like. or the 11 plus curriculum, if there's such a thing. And this really was done deliberately because we don't have a huge amount of time with the children in terms of maths. We did want to make sure that we cover everything off. And as we go through the year, I think we're certainly going to be offering masterclasses as well. These very much reinforce what we teach in the centres, just to make sure that children's math skills are strong. Anything you as parents can do at home to reinforce that maths is great. Certainly the books we've just been using do have some outstanding pieces of work that your child can go through and complete. It's not a case that we will use those books again, so please do feel free to go through some of those materials that your child has not completed. I just wonder, I could draw on Paula. Paula, are you there? Hope she's still there.
I am.
Hi, Paula. Hi, thanks for joining us tonight. And I know, as with Sarah and Sarah, I know you work with a lot of children at Teach It Right, and I know maths is a passion of yours in that sense that you're sort of teaching that on a daily basis in a secondary school. But what have you noticed about sort of maths knowledge with your groups, and where do you see us sort of moving forward?
So the maths, I think, is one of the most challenging topic in 11 plus, because they actually can pick any kind of question type. Plus the level, sometimes they are reaching to secondary school. We are going to cover nth term. We are sometimes covering equations. We are doing quite complicated work problems. So the challenge in maths, it's huge. And I'm really glad that we started introducing percentages, fraction topics already with the basic, with the multiplication, division, plussing and minusing. What I found out with the test was 100 questions, and they are most of them were like, oh my gosh, 100 questions, which was like, oh, that's a lot. So some of them ran out of steam, to be honest. So they were doing really, really well. I would say the first half an hour, they were pushing the 40 minutes. But when we start reaching the 50 minutes, that you could see them really, really slowing down, and the mistakes started to appear because they were getting tired. That's why we are introducing testing regularly and early, so they get used to and they get stamina in these environments. I believe the maths compared to English in my classes was absolutely phenomenal. Most of my students did really, really well. On average, I had 85%, which is, dream. So I am extremely happy with the students, what they are currently doing. But I know more meaty topics are coming. So if you could practice with them as much as you can, making lists of topics your child is struggling, especially during the homework, and then check the master classes and pick exactly the master classes which goes with your child's topic they are struggling with, will be amazing, because the more you do, the easier it's going to be. And when we hit the maths topics in block 4, they will be ready to learn more.
Paula, thank you very much. And I think you're right. I think it was a case, certainly with this block, about trying to set those very strong foundations. I appreciate quite a few of our students have been with us in year 4 and did exceptionally well in that maths block. But we also do have pupils that started with us in September who haven't worked with us before. And we did need to ensure that things like long multiplication, the division methods that they can add, they can subtract, were secure. And it needs to be there. If they don't have those fundamentals of maths, they will find those areas later on within the year more difficult. So anything you can do at home. I know we've plugged BBC Bite Size already tonight, but I will do that again in the sense of the maths, that you can certainly go to some of the Key Stage 3 topic areas. It's a phenomenal website, lots and lots of resources on there that you can delve into. But of course, don't forget, as Paula mentioned, we do have masterclasses that we will be running in maths, and certainly for those children that are finding it a little bit more difficult and need help with certain topic areas. And as Paula said, if you know the specific ones that your child's struggling on, those are the ones to focus on. It's all about tailoring it to what your child needs. Some children might be really good at adding, some children might find division really difficult. So it's all about ensuring that we marry up those topics with the children's individual needs. Just while we are talking about maths, I'll also just mention that in January, on the 14th of January, we will be doing a maths workshop. And I would really encourage you to come along to that. Thank you so much to those parents who have come to the verbal and the non-verbal reasoning. I think I had 47 parents on the non-verbal one, which was phenomenal. But we're very keen to get you to come along to this one. Luke Lloyd will be very much delivering that session. He is our sort of maths specialist within the team, even though all of our tutors are absolutely brilliant maths teachers. Luke Lloyd will be there to deliver lots of his hints and tips around how best to support your child at home with maths as well, because we do very much need you on side with making sure that your child is confident with maths. I think I have heard it too often whereby, you know, a child's told they're not good at maths. Maybe that's at school, or someone's told them that they can't do it, and that really can impact their maths ability. So keeping it positive, and we'll be giving you lots of tips and hints on how to ensure that your child feels supported in this topic area. You can book online. So if you visit our Teach It Right website, you can book online for the 14th of January, and that will run from 4 to 6 o'clock. So 2 hours of maths there. Just to talk to you about general observations then within our centres. Do feel we've got a wonderful set of pupils this year. Absolutely amazing. I've spoken to quite a few tutors recently and sort of saying, you know, how are your children getting on? How do you feel they've been? And I must admit, pretty much every tutor has said to me how brilliant the children have been, how focused they are. We know that it can sometimes ebb and flow a little bit. This happens through any course. It is about keeping their interest, their motivation, and I know our tutors will be doing everything they can to keep them engaged in the course. But generally, we've been very happy with the strategies and techniques that they've been applying. Homework has been of a high standard. Please, if you do feel that your child is struggling with the homework, do access the homework club, but also come and speak to the tutors as well. We've had 1 or 2 children who have said that they find it difficult to fit into their normal week. So do come and speak to us, because we can always do things and have conversations with the children about ways of managing their homework, particularly when we've got it sort of layered with the you must and the you could. We've already talked about their knowledge around addition and subtraction, generally very, very strong. But we do feel we do need to revise division and multiplication. So do look out for some emails before the Christmas holidays that will help your child with those 2 topics. Continually, please build up that vocabulary, even though we've been doing English comprehension. Vocabulary is really key to success with the 11 plus. So lots of antonyms and synonyms work is worth focusing on. We, of course, will be doing that in the next block when we go to verbal and non-verbal reasoning again. Do continue to build up an understanding of spelling patterns. That's really important. So do focus on those spellings every week. That's really crucial. So where do we go next? So certainly for our GL assessment pupils, we will be doing verbal and non-verbal reasoning. If you are doing Reading Boys, we'll be coming back to creative writing, doing some more creative writing with the children. But certainly if you are either working for Kendrick, the Slough Consortium, or any of the schools in Bucks, then we're going to be going back to verbal and non-verbal. The verbal reasoning will focus on some of the question types we haven't done yet this academic year. So we'll be looking at things like codes, logic questions, some of the number-related questions that are involved in verbal reasoning. And also in non-verbal, we'll be doing some more 3D NVR question types, things like hidden shapes, fold and punch, and having some great fun with exposing children to those particular areas. I've also mentioned within this slide that we'll be doing things on time management. I think certainly when we get into the new year, we do want to be making children more aware of how long they're taking. We don't start doing time tests until sort of block 5 and 6, but tutors start to make the children slightly more aware of how long they are taking, because it is an important aspect. Yes, the understanding has to be there, but we recognise this as a time test, and we do need children to get through all of the questions that they're set, and that will give them the best chance of success. Any change in the test style this year? So I'm just reading out a question that's been put in the chat. In terms of GL assessment, then no. Then that became very much a similar format to what we have been used to with GL, certainly in Buckinghamshire and Slough and Kendrick. There have been a couple of new question types that we know have been introduced, even things like reshuffled sentences entering into GL. So we will be looking at that across the year. The reason that we've also put CEM in there is because some of our pupils are focusing on certain independent schools that require a CEM online test. So that's one of the reasons we still need to cover off some of that. But certainly for GL, then there were no huge surprises. And the feedback we got from our students this year was that the question types were all very, very familiar. And that gives us huge confidence moving forward. The exam board can change things. That is their prerogative if they want to do that. But hopefully there will be nothing in there that is not, completely unfamiliar. But if it is, they'll be able to apply the skills that they've learned with us. So, we feel very confident in what we sort of cover off with our course. So just to mention about a couple of Christmassy things, and then there's another question in the chat about Homework Club. So I will just confirm timings for that. So we do run it on a Monday and we do run it on a Tuesday. The year 4s is run on a Monday from 4:30 to 5:30, and then 5:30 to 6:30 is our timings for our year 5s. Please do contact the office if you want any more clarification on that. Someone saying they couldn't get into the Homework Club, so just make sure we resend you the links. So please just give the office a call and we can easily send that out to you. The Christmas competition is to win a Cubics. So very, very exciting. If you would like your child to be entered in that, we have sent out Christmas competition sheets. Get your child to complete those questions. If they do get all 10 questions right, which I'm sure they will do, our Christmas elves, or so known as our markers, will get it checked through for you. And the closing date for that is Sunday, the 17th of December. And the draw will be held at the beginning of that week, and you'll find out if your child is the winner. So yeah, nice little prize. Cubics is a game that we use sometimes within the non-verbal lessons. So a couple of little reminders on our dates. Next block, of course, starts this coming Saturday. We'll be giving out all the new books for the children, lots of books. I will just mention that really on behalf of the tutors, I'm sure they want me to say this, if you've got any old books, do leave those at home. Don't sort of fill up your bags so your child can't sort of walk into the centres. Do make sure that they leave those old ones at home and just bring in what they need for block 3. Last session will be on the 17th of December. That's the Sunday. And then classes do resume quite early back in the new year on Tuesday, the 2nd of January. So we do hope the children do have a well-earned rest over the Christmas holidays. Super important. They recharge their batteries, ready to go in the new year. We will also be holding on December the 18th a free monster quiz. This is something that we do a lot over the summer. Any child can come along, whether that's year 4, year 5, and that will be great fun to do some Christmas quizzes. They need to have a separate device, and they have great fun sort of racing against each other. I won't tell you too much more, but great fun to join in. Can I thank our wonderful tutors for joining tonight? I'm sure they've all had long days, as I'm sure all of you have, but I do appreciate their insight into how their children have been getting on. It's been great to hear from them. And we'd just like to wish everyone, of course, a wonderful Christmas time. I know we're not quite there yet, got a few more weeks to go. I hope you were okay with this format. We do find it's having 87 of you here tonight is phenomenal. So I really appreciate it. This obviously, I think, does work well for people. It is slightly more convenient than maybe coming into the halls and the classrooms in the centres, but don't let me put you off also engaging with the tutors, speaking to them. They will obviously always do their feedback huddles at the end, but they are sure more than happy to talk to you about how your child is getting on. Thank you very much for joining me tonight, and look forward to seeing you in the centres soon. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Cheers.
bye.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, guys. Cheers. Thanks for joining us. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.